I resist a lot of the conventional advice, which is you don't edit as you go.
Okay.
I do edit as I go. I constantly go back. My first chapters are, I spend 90% of my writing time on that first chapter, and then 10% on the whole rest of the book.
Welcome to our latest Book Reporter Talks to interview. Our guest today is Bonnie Kistler, and we are going to be talking about her latest thriller, The Cage, her second thriller. Her first thriller, House on Fire, was a Bookreporter Bets On selection, as The Cage will be. And I have to tell you that Bonnie's one of those authors that when I read House on Fire, I was like, I need another book. I need to read another book. So I was so happy when The Cage came along. And boy, sometimes the sophomore book disappoints, and this one did not. If anything, it just ratcheted up her talent in my mind. So welcome, Bonnie. So nice to have you here.
Thank you, Carol. Nice to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
So let's start by your telling us about The Cage. I want to hear how you describe it, because I've been running around telling people.
It's hard for me to describe because all these genre labels are so confusing to me. I mean, it's a psychological thriller, it's an office thriller, it's a corporate thriller, it's a legal thriller to some degree, it's suspense, it's not exactly a locked room mystery, it's rather a closed circle mystery. Mm-hmm. So let me describe the setup here. It takes place in the offices of an international fashion conglomerate, and two women are working late on a Sunday night. One of them is the director of HR, pretty senior executive in the company, excuse me. And the other is a new hire in the law department, low-level lawyer. Working late on a Sunday night, they both leave their offices at the same time, get into the elevator going down. When it stops, it's stuck, it's broken. Lights go off, air compressor goes off, everything's off. And we don't know exactly what happens then. What happens is fire department comes, brings the elevator down to the lobby level, they open the doors, and the director of HR is slumped dead on the floor of the elevator. The young lawyer, Shay Lambert, burst out and tells the police, who have gathered by this time, that her compatriot in the elevator had a panic attack when the elevator shut down, as some people do, but an extreme panic attack. In this case, she claims she took a gun from her purse and shot herself in the head. The police are skeptical. And the first third of the book is Shay trying to convince the police that it was in fact suicide, that she had no reason to murder this woman. Meanwhile, her boss, the general counsel of the company, is going to extraordinary lengths to make it look the opposite way. He is desperate that it not be suicide for reasons that are yet to be discovered. Middle part of the book, Shay's in jail. I'm going to give it away right now. The police don't buy her story. Shay's in jail. And then third part of the book, Shay's out of jail and out for revenge. And that's how the book then carries on from that point.
And it is quick. It's like quickly well paced, because you're sitting there like, what is going on? And you as the reader are going to go back and forth on what's happening. Now,
that was my goal. Yeah. To make you think, to be, oh, Shay's innocent. No, wait a minute. Is Shay innocent? I don't know. And just keep going back and forth.
Just keep going back and forth. What's interesting too is you set up an elevator, and you wrote about a piece for your website about your thoughts about being in an elevator. So share yours, and I'm going to share mine, because I have something funny that I always thought when I was in an elevator.
Good. Well, a lot of people have a fear of elevators. I have two daughters who won't get on an elevator because of claustrophobia, which is a common enough fear. And then, of course, there's the fear of strangers, fear of crowds, fear of falling. My fear, I worked for many years, I practiced law, working for big law firms in high-rise buildings. So I was spending much of the day riding up and down in these elevators. And my fear was very particular. I didn't want to get stuck in an elevator with somebody I didn't like or who didn't like me. And because I was a litigator, there were a lot of lawyers in town who didn't like me or I didn't like them. We'd crossed swords, we'd had angry words. I'd beaten them a case, they'd beaten me in a case, although fortunately more often the other way.
Right, of course.
And my fear was, having to ride this elevator, and you'd stand there in stony silence with somebody and just have an unpleasant, 2 minutes until you got to your floor. But I started to imagine, what if this elevator broke down? What if I were stuck in this elevator with this guy who hates me? And I'd start to imagine all kinds of terrible things, violence, scuffles. murder, sexual assault. And so that was really where the germ of the idea got planted in my mind. What if these two women get stuck in the elevator? There's a history, a little bit of a history there that might make it go either way in terms of who did what to whom in that elevator. And that was what prompted the whole thing.
That was probably, oh my gosh, it's so funny. Well, we always were in an elevator. The one thing I would think about is if we got stuck, who had food? So if we came back, like say I was running out at lunchtime, and I'm like, I get in and it'd be like really crowded. I go, okay, you have food. Okay, if we get stuck, we're okay. Because who's got drink? Because if you're in there for a while. And I remember one time I was at a conference, it was way back in the early days. We're at an AOL Partners conference. We were stuck in this elevator for what was the whole cocktail hour, which was the mixing time that you would go out and actually, get to see other people. And I got off at the elevator and I turned, I don't know how I had the nerve to do this. I just turned, I said, I'm in room 701. I think you know what to do. And the person who was with me goes, what are they going to do? I said, they're going to credit me a night. That's what I'm expecting for being stuck in this elevator. And sure enough, I got credited. My friend goes, you just walked out and so cool. Everybody's yelling. And I just go, 710, you know what to do. There's my elevator stories, but they were nothing
Very
like being in the cage.
You turned it to your advantage.
Okay. Who's got good lunch? Because I'll hold up my lunch. I can share, So you think about this being locked room at the very beginning, as we were talking about, and it's not, but the scenes were set up to set up tension really right from the start, really, really there. Did you always open the book the same way when you were writing, or did things change along the way?
The opening was always the same. The ending was different, and I can't tell you too much without giving it away, other than, well, I've already set up the big question, was it murder or suicide? And for a long time while I was writing this book, I was going to leave it up to the reader to decide. Sort of like that old classic Lady or the Tiger story. And I actually put out a poll to the universe. What would you think if you read this? And the answers were overwhelmingly, I would be so frustrated, I would throw that book across the room. I thought, I guess I do have to answer the question. So that's why we have an answer.
Well, do you know what's really funny? There's the book, The Paper Palace, that came out last year. And you get to the last page and they're like, what happens to her at that point? So we were at our book group and I said, so what happened? 2 people thought one thing, 6 people thought the other thing. And I'm like, really? Was it really not that clear? And she's really funny because she says, I think it's really clear too. And people are like, no, it's so ambiguous. And the questions have just been so much fun. But I agree that people are like, oh no, I want to be able to do this. I want to know, So you've got these characters. You've got Lucy Barton Jones. She's the head of HR, and Shay Lambert. She's the corporate lawyer. They're at this fashion conglomerate. So tell us a little bit about each of them, because their backstories are something they're going to influence what happens in the story a lot too.
Very much, yes. Lucy is, as I said, a senior executive in the company. She's a Brit by birth and comes from this long, distinguished British family who first, like a lot of the old distinguished British families, earned their fortune in the transatlantic slave trade back in the 16 and 1700s. So she feels this terrible stain on her family legacy. And that sort of works into her psyche. Now, she's been in the United States for some time and being a senior executive in this company, but she's haunted by this family past and her desire to escape this family past, this stain on the family name. Shay is entirely a self-made, self-invented young woman. She comes from poverty, from a pretty squalid family background, which she has erased entirely from her CV, from her own mind. She is no longer that person. She managed, just through grit and smarts to get herself a first-rate education, to go through college law school and land a top flight job with a Wall Street law firm. And she's a rising star in this firm. Now, I've set this deliberately a decade or two in the past because I wanted to bring in the Great Recession of 2008. I knew a lot of young professionals at that time who, through no fault of their own, lost their jobs or lost the position they would have occupied, and never, even though we've supposedly recovered from the recession pretty quickly, they never really recovered. They never got back on the ladder of success where they would have. And I was thinking of that when I wrote Shay. Even though she's a rising star, because of forces in her law firm, she gets laid off. She loses her job. And her husband, who worked for an investment bank, same thing happened in the investment bank community, also loses his job. The two of them just go into an absolute downward spiral, partly of their own making. They engaged in a lot of self-sabotage, but the story picks up, opens 5 years later. For 5 years, Shay has been underemployed. When she finally is able to get a job with this fashion company, which is, as I said, an international conglomerate. They have offices in New York, Paris, factories in Southeast Asia. And so it's a big deal. And she's very excited to go to work there. And that's where the story takes off.
Yeah, it really takes off. And, I hadn't thought about the recovery time after the recession, but there are a lot of people that were like here on the ladder that are off the ladder now, because you can get somebody here and bring them up. You can get somebody for cheaper. You can get somebody like right out of school, get somebody.
That's what happened with law firms. Yeah. A lot of law firms laid off their, in Shay's case, I think she was a 3rd or 4th year associate, laid them off. And then they hired brand new people right out of law school. And as she reflects bitterly, they had no stains on their resumes. No one had ever found them to be disposable. They're still bright and shiny, where she has this, this cloud hanging over her through no fault of her own.
And it's true, because the other law firm would have had them for 3 to 4 years, molding them the way they want. But if you go to another company, it's just not going to happen the same way. And we think of people losing money, but I have to say, when you're bringing this up, I hadn't thought of that level of professional for losing their job. I thought of the top people. I thought of that, but also they were living this very high lifestyle, like ridiculously high. And it was things that they couldn't easily recoup. You can't easily recoup the shoes with the red soles. There's certain things that you just can't get your full money back on. And so when you meet her, she had been here, got herself to here, and now is back way down here, simply because it's not that way out that a good education would bring her or whatever. This has got to be something completely different. And she's like, thrown awry as a result. And she's vulnerable. I always thought that, she was very vulnerable. So now I understand why you wrote the character that way, and why. Also, she's got this husband that is a huge liability, and the way
such a drag on her. Yes, I mean, he suffered the same fate she did. He was the same, came from the same kind of background, was also self-made, rising star when this happened, but he didn't have the inner fortitude that she has, and he just completely falls apart. And she's really stuck trying to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, and it also raised the stakes that much more of his behavior, because his behavior is very erratic. His behavior borders on criminal. And as a result, it brings her into a whole different set of circumstances when she starts to be questioned about what happened, because they see him too and say, da-da-da. So what do you do when you start developing character? Do you make notes? Do you, with this idea came to you right at the beginning, and then did you see those two people fully formed, or were there 3 people, or was there something else going on?
I think I saw Shay fully formed. I think she was a character that is not a whole lot different from me. I fortunately didn't suffer the same reversals in life that she did, but I could see, I came from a working class background and, managed to get an Ivy League education and land in top law firms. I had a husband who didn't do anything bad, fortunately. I was much luckier than she was. But anyway, she came fully formed to me. She's obviously a lot smarter and grittier than I am, especially in the last act of the book, when she maneuvers things so brilliantly. Lucy was a different story. She came more slowly. In an earlier draft, in fact, I had her being Asian by birth. And having the same pressures that came from her concern for her countrymen, and what kind of conflict that might have caused her. And it was brought home to me that I, as a white woman, really shouldn't be attempting to write this character as an Asian woman without knowing a whole lot more. And I agreed with that. And so then I decided I really feel as though the Brits have gotten away with a lot in terms of, we, the Americans, have this terrible cloud stain on our country because of the history of slavery, as we should. But the Brits, who were responsible for bringing them here and making all this money, it's kind of like they just sailed off la-di-da. And I don't feel they've suffered the same cultural penalty that white America has. they may feel differently. But anyway, that's why I thought it would be fun to make her come from that kind of background. And then to make her be a very composed, uptight kind of person, an adult retentive executive. She's got a spotless desk. She's perfectly turned out, because those are often the kinds of people I think who shatter most easily. And that's the question is, did Lucy shatter in that elevator? Did she shatter and kill herself?
And did she just break? Did she just get to the breaking point? She's got young children. It's like this whole thing. But by the same token, she's also, because she's not American and she's not French, which is where the company is located, she's sort of not of either of the countries. And I thought that that was something to say too, because she's really an outsider. And the fashion game, I think it was interesting that you said it in the fashion business as well, because it's really a game. I worked at Condé Nast for 17 years, and we spent a lot of time at the fashion shows and the fashion avenue and going and looking at different lines and things like that. And to just see what was happening and how clothes were made and how things were put together and who had the voices to say this is going to work or it's not going to work. So I felt like when you were doing this, it was like, oh, this is this line that's doing this. And then I thought of something else this weekend. A friend of mine was over and we kept talking about, you see things on Instagram, they pop up and they look really cute and you buy them, these shirts that had the little Western prints, and they're really bad. And we said they came from China, like they came from like this manufacturer. They said large there is about this big. So none of the clothes are going to fit. We were laughing about this. And she said, let's be honest, everything is made at some point overseas. It's just that some have designers that are actually saying, make it this size and make it whatever. And I was thinking about that when I was thinking back on the book this morning, because it's true. It's not like somebody in New York is going to go make the clothes. They're being all made in a different place. So the business being in 3 different places makes the business more interesting as well. Because you're not where anything happens,
And also the great disparity between the glamour, the high flying people in New York and Paris, and then the people in the sweatshops who are actually making the clothes. And I really wanted to, display that huge gulf there.
And there are many times you'll buy something. In fact, you'll hold it up and you go, is this really the same size? If you buy the same thing in 4 different colors, one could be a different size. So you're always coming home and I'm like, wait a second, even from Uniqlo, let me just try this shirt on and see if it's going to fit me later, like at the moment I need it, But it's like the fashion business is one where, clothes are made and who makes them is something we think about, but we've thought about a lot more this last year with supply chain of can you get it and can't. But before that, it was just things showed up at the store.
Yeah, that's true.
So you, like so many thriller writers, were a lawyer or are a lawyer. I don't think you ever don't become a lawyer. So what brought your career to writing? And my obvious thought is you have really good discipline because you knew how to do something, that you had to make a date, you had to get something done by a certain date. What do you bring to writing from being a lawyer?
Not that much discipline. I have to confess.
Really?
My life as a lawyer was so regimented. I mean, we build our time in 6-minute increments. Imagine accounting for your day in 6-minute increments. That's how we kept our timesheets. That's how we build our clients. Once I left the law, it was this freedom. I no longer had to keep a timesheet. I could, squander an hour here. I could squander 2 hours there. It was so liberating, and I like it very much. so I practice that way now. I don't have the discipline. What my law career did do for me is attention to detail. When I was preparing a case for trial, I would have to delve into every document. Every witness would have to be interviewed, multiple times. I'd have to know every fact inside out. And I think that kind of attention to detail helps me in plotting, especially when there's kind of convoluted, complicated plots, to keep things, to make sure everything hangs together, that it all makes sense, that you don't do something on page 100 that contradicts what you did on page 50. So I think attention to detail helps. The other thing is that much of my work as a litigator was on the writing end. I wrote, for courts, I wrote for, clients, and I made it because I was a writer. I felt like I was a writer even the whole time I was a lawyer. I felt like I was a writer first. I made a point of bringing color to my work and not writing the dry, bare bones kind of legal stuff that everybody hates to read. I mean, first of all, I didn't do transactional law, so I was never party the first part, party the second part, that kind of right. I was instead the kind of, if it pleased the court kind of lawyer, where I would use language to illuminate, to persuade, persuading being, the most important thing because I'm trying to win this case. And this, I have to confess, I also used language to distract or obfuscate, because there were times when I didn't have the strongest point on something, and you need to kind of get the court to not pay too much attention to that. Let's stay here. And so when you're dropping clues in a mystery, I mean, you had to play fair with the reader. The clue has to be there, but you don't want to hit it over the head. You want to just let it slide by. And so they remember when the big reveal happens at the end, they remember, oh yes, I remember now that was mentioned. But if you hit it too hard, then, it gives away the surprise. And they say, oh, I figured this out. And maybe some people will still figure it out. I hope not, but.
No, and there's this the pacing that has to happen too, of going, okay, we're in here, we're out. And as you said, in all three parts of the book and the epilogue, you switch back and forth on what you're thinking. And you're very much switching our heads of who is the good person, who is the bad person, who is really who you really want to be thinking about. So what kind of law did you practice? You were a trial lawyer?
I was a trial lawyer, corporate litigation, big business.
Wow.
Big companies suing each other. That's the kind of work I did. I always like to say no humans involved. I didn't do criminal defense. I didn't do divorce, nothing where there were messy emotions involved. It was all dollars,
Yeah. It's all like, you did this, you did that, we deserve this. Yeah. There we go. There we go. So when you're trying, and that was my next question, is you're in trial, you're setting a stage, you're bringing a story to light to a client's advantage. So from that training, that's what you were doing with the storytelling. That's what you were talking about, is you're trying to advantage the person. So you're trying to say, oh, Shay, she's the victim. Oh, wait, hold on. Who's the victim? Oh, let's play games with the reader. But you have to say, I agree, fair.
Yes.
There's also a lot of legal procedural details in here that I read and I learned a lot about. There were things that I didn't know. And it's the kind of thing where you have to pay attention at those parts, because it's something that, unless you're a lawyer, you have not been through a lot of what these terms are or whatever. But by learning about them, I just felt like I was getting this like little education, like this crash course in the law. And to me, it was easy to follow. Were you trying to make all that readable without, because there are parts where Shay is doing stuff where it could have been a lot more detailed, but you were trying to bring it to the reader, because you have to understand that to understand where the book's going to go.
Yeah, I really hope that I was able to do that without too much, legal jargon and dry, boring, detailed stuff. I think that, a lot of readers are put off by that. They don't like lawyers. And I don't blame them. I mean, I don't like lawyers very much either when they're doing that kind of stuff. So I hope that I was able to keep it in lay terms and give just enough that you can figure out who's on what side. When the plaintiff's lawyer, the class action lawyer, Mark, comes into play, you need to understand what he's up to and why he wants to, get into Shay's mind and bed, and what he's why he needs that information and what he hopes to gain. But you don't need to know exactly all the ins and outs of how shareholder litigation works. That's beyond all of us.
But what's interesting too is, like, you don't do those boxes, you do these, you do this in this order, don't go there. You're not privy to that piece of information. You're only going to get this, and this is all you need to concentrate on. So the whole time Shay is working, she's realizing she only has part of the story, and she can't get near the other things because they're in a room that are someplace else. So she's trying to conjecture what's there. And I think it is sometimes there's so much withheld that you can't tell your story because you don't have it.
Uh-huh.
And
that's a good metaphor for, yeah.
It was like being withheld. You're like, what's there? We want to go down the hall with her. We want to go see what's being hidden, things like that. So 2014 gave you the time frame that people were able to, like, did people just not hire for a couple of years? Like when 2008-9 hit, did they just say, we're not bringing anybody on except, first year associates, or even that?
Or even that, yeah. The first couple of years after the recession, there was pretty much a hiring freeze in the professions. And then, as you pointed out earlier, then it's okay, we're feeling solid again, let's start hiring. They were hiring the kids out of law school, and we'll train them ourselves, and we'll also get them, at our starting salary, not at what we were paying, third, fourth, fifth year associates, and that's the way it worked. So the people who lost their jobs in the first flush of the recession, if they didn't get hired back, and most of them didn't, they went to work for, they came down the ladder to, from top tier firm to second tier to third tier, or they left the profession altogether.
I don't think about that in any kind of situation. Even it could have happened like, 2020, 2021. We didn't need these people. Now, when we bring back on, are we going to go look for those people, or are we going to go bring low-level talent on? What can we do?
Yeah.
And, we're hearing right now, because it's, so many people are exiting their jobs. Like, they're just saying, I don't want to do this. I'm of an age where people sit there and say, they've either made enough or they've had enough, like they've fed up with what's going on. And that's the way that you go to work every day, which I think would be a terrible way to go to work, but that's what's happening with a lot of people. And now you see people that are just walking away, because if I can't have work on my terms, I don't want to do it.
I want to do it.
So we wouldn't have seen that if this happened in 2014. We would have seen people just wanting to get back to work. And it was interesting for you to bring, because I was trying to figure out why it was 2014. And if we were crawling back out, that was the timing where that would be happening. Interesting. Then you have to remember what's there in 2014 and what's not, because there's a whole bunch of technology that's not around in 2014. I mean, as my son said to me the other day, when they were retiring the BlackBerry, remember that was your favorite thing?
Yes.
And you never thought you were going to want a different kind of phone because I had my BlackBerry. So were you limited by that at all? Like, did you have to sit there and say what technology was really there?
And an important plot element is the virtual assistant program that the company has, which was in 2014 would have been in its infancy. Today, we all know, and I can't say her name because she'll start talking to me here in the room, but we all have our virtual assistants and we know how to use them. It was still very new in 2014, so it would have been cutting edge and something that the company was, boastful about, but that Shay would, especially Shay, having been out of the workplace for 5 years, it's totally new to her.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, okay, these people are just going to go do this, and you just hand it away, and it's completely different. But it's also the tech to find people, like find your phone, find all that wasn't there then. So a lot of the things, yes, social media was there. Social media was there, but it was just the way we were the way we were discovering things was different in 2014, which is hard to believe only 8 years ago.
I know.
And it's like, I don't think I could do this.
How it exploded. Yeah.
Yeah. So many readers are going to root for who they want to win. Like I want this one to win. I want that one to win. Did you have fun shifting it back and forth? Like really shifting the clues back and forth for us?
I really did. I chose a first person voice for because I thought readers are going to instantly dislike her if I do, because she's got all this stuff going on. And because she's, the unreliable narrator is a big thing in recent, suspense fiction, and I love it. But a lot of the unreliable narrators from the blockbusters that we're all familiar with were unreliable because, she was passed out drunk, she's a drop dead drunk, or she's on drug, or she's got mental health issues, or all the ones, or she's, anyway, in Shay's case, she's an unreliable narrator because she's deliberately withholding information from the reader and from the police. She's telling part of the truth truthfully, but there's so many things she's not telling. And I thought, well, I'll give her a first person voice so that the reader feels like they're getting into her head. But then it was like when the police confront her with something that she wasn't part of her story before, and they're like, wait a minute, you didn't tell us that, Shay. And I want them to feel that little bit of sense of, I was along with you on this journey, and now you've gone and done this to me, and feel a little betrayed, and then, make them go back and forth. That was part of what I hoped would go on in their minds as they read this character.
And even something happens from her past that becomes her present. And it was like something she wants to be able to hide, and she can't. And now you're with this unreliable, it's me kind of narrator. And we didn't get that disclosed to us at all before because she's withholding. She's not going to share.
Yep.
Like, it's like crazy. So these detectives, we've got these two detectives, Cruz and Riley, and they've assigned to this case. And I think they're as perplexed as everybody else is. And they've got Shay. They're not really sure they should have Shay, but they need to have somebody. So she's it. So tell us about the two of them, because they really add a lot to the story by their personalities and whatever.
Yeah. There's old guy Riley, young guy Cruz. Cruz is a by the book, coming up, ambitious young guy. Riley's at the end of his tenure. He's ready to hang up his hat, and he kind of is just sitting back and letting Cruz, do all the labor and work on all of this. But he's still a smart old crusty guy, and his ears perk up now and then. And he's the one who, at the end, puts everything together. But they are distrustful of Shay.
Mhm.
They sort of like her, but they just can't be sure. And then they've got the general counsel of the company, Ingram Barrett, coming over with all of this evidence that seems clearly to point to it not being suicide, that it had to have been murder, it had to have been Shay. And so they're being kind of played by both sides. They're in the middle, being played by both sides here. And like the reader, I think, go back and forth trying to figure out which way it goes.
Yeah, which way? And they are really playing their roles, the young guy and the older guy. And it's, you can actually see the characters on a show. You can see exactly, who they're going to be, and wait, no, we can't do this. And then there's so many things that happen with her, though, that make them go, see, I was right. I can't trust her. Even when Cruz is trying to cut her some break. And it's also interesting the way I say, rationing her clothes, because she doesn't have many. And she's got to say, like, it's a cold day. I don't have a coat for that. I don't have this. I don't have that. And now she's playing a complete game all day long about what's going on. So she's playing it to them. She's playing it to people in the company, and she's playing it to herself in a lot of ways too, of who am I and what am I? Like, she hasn't figured it out yet. So,
Yeah.
So the epilogue has this aha moment. No one can read ahead. No reading that.
No,
end.
don't read the epilogue, please.
Don't do that
until you reach it.
Yeah. Did you? Oh, it's so the epilogue. Did you know it was going to be there? Did you, or what do we decide later on? You did put that in later?
When I was writing the book, I was going to let it end without the epilogue, and it would have been a mistake. I'm so glad I didn't do it. That I, especially since there's this twist at the end of, wait a minute, I was on team A or I was on team B. Wait a minute, I don't know which team, and anyway, I'm very glad that I was persuaded that we need to show our cards here.
So the cards.
What actually did happen. And so it's laid out in the epilogue and through this virtual assistant in the company, which has recorded, because as we all know, our phones are always listening to us.
Yes. Yeah. It's really funny because you'll sit there and you'll search something one time, and then it's for the rest of your life. It's coming up.
Your pop-up ads forever will be.
And I'm like, and people are always saying, well, I'm not going to go on social media because they won't know anything about me then. And I'm like, it's far deeper than social media. It's far deeper. I mean, just look up something on Google and you'll get it for the next 3 days, how these things happened. And some people think it's just like, it's because they thought it. It's like, not the thought police, it's the click police. It's not the thought police. It's very funny though. Very funny. So do you outline in advance, or is this messy first draft, or how do you cruise along with these books?
I don't outline. I have, research files full of details of all the legal details that I need, forensic detail, everything that I've researched, I put it in different files that I access, but I don't outline scenes or chapters. I have my starting premise. I have my cast of characters. I'll have a file of who my characters are, and I know where it's going to end up. And then I just take it from there. I just, I wouldn't exactly say I'm a pantser. That's the word people like to use in this
right.
writing by the seat of your pants. I'm not a pantser, but I'm definitely not an outliner.
Right. So is the first draft messy, or is the first draft? It's pretty clean. I think I could show it to somebody.
Should be messier than it is. The reason it's not messy is that I resist a lot of the conventional advice, which is you don't edit as you go.
Okay.
I do edit as I go. I constantly go back. My first chapters are, I spend 90% of my writing time on that first chapter, and then 10% on the whole rest of the book. But because I'm just constantly going back, and they're like, oh, I'm on this scene now, but now that I think about it, I really should have done X, Y, Z in that scene. And I go back and I do it. So that by the time the first draft is done, it's pretty much done.
Wow. Wow. That's great. Yeah. Because a lot of people say it's like so messy, like what they do. And then later on, they're going to think it all through. But I think that your training by being a lawyer was, you can't do that because you can't get into the courtroom and go, can I have an extra day while I put it all together and bring it back to you?
Let me see if I can figure this all out. Yes, I'll piece these pieces together.
Yeah, here's A, here's B. We'll be back with C and D tomorrow. Maybe E and F too. Not really sure. We're not really sure. So how close is what the readers are reading now? We know the epilogue came in later. Were there lots of character changes that happened? Like, were there always two detectives? Was there always the people in the office the same way?
Yeah, the people in the office, in the company were basically the same. The two detectives were always there. In an early draft, I also had the prosecutor, the assistant district attorney, who was going to make the decision whether to charge this woman or not for this crime. And I was having her be in the observation room watching the interrogation. And it was coming off a little bit too much as a, procedural, a police procedural kind of thing, which was never my intention. The cops are in there, but it's not like a Michael Connelly book. It's never going to be that, or John Sanford or whatever. So I took her out, and she's an interesting character, though. I may revisit her some other day.
We'll put her another time, but no, it wasn't going to work for this one. And,
right.
Okay. So the title, was it always The Cage?
Yes. Yes.
It was.
It's always The Cage. It's their line in there about the elevators, they call them cars. And Shay thinks to herself, why do they call them a car? You can stop, you can get out. Here, you're just stuck. They ought to call it what it really is, a cage. So I like the idea of a cage for that. And then, of course, the cage that she's in when she's in jail is the second reference to the cage. And then there's yet a third reference to cage as a metaphor for something that's going on that I'm not going to reveal because it would spoil the book. But anyway, the cage was, from the earliest conception.
And it's interesting too, because there's also where she lives. And that's another thing that feels like a cage. So I was thinking of that one as well. So too.
That's a good point, Carol. Thank you.
Yeah. It's like, I just sat there like, wait, that wasn't looking so good. I think there were bars on that too.
Yes.
So in the UK, the title is 7 Minutes Later. Okay. And I have seen books with different covers in different countries. I haven't seen different titles, either that or in foreign languages. And I don't know what they are because I speak no other language. I can barely speak English plus Spanish, Was there a lot of discussion about a title in a foreign country, or when you sold the book to them, it's you do what you want?
They floated the title change to me, and I was not a big fan, just because for all the reasons I described, that I liked The Cage so much. And 7 Minutes Later is a reference to, and in fact, I didn't even remember what it was a reference to when they first floated this title to me, because they're actually in that elevator for 2 hours that they're stuck before rescue comes. They're like, wait, it's 2 hours later before. And what they pointed me back to my own words, so I was stuck with them. But it's 7 minutes later is when she makes, from the time the elevator gets stuck, or when they get on, I forget, until Shay makes the 911 call. So it really is, they're quite right, my UK publishers, that what happened in those 7 minutes is the big mystery of the book. Right. And not the 2 hours. And so they felt that for their market, it would grab people more 7 minutes later rather than The Cage. And also, I suppose because in the UK, they don't say elevator, they say lift.
Lift, right. I was just thinking that too. It's the lift.
Yeah, right. The Cage might not have the same resonance there.
No, it's not going to do that. So we don't have a copy, but the cover. So the cover, was that always the cover art? Was that always the way it was envisioned?
It was. I remember the moment because I was just out to lunch with my husband when I got an email from my editor saying, what do you think? And I'm looking at it on my phone thinking, I'm only looking at a little tiny screen, but I love it. I love this cover. And it was a nice change for me because my previous book, House on Fire, went through several different iterations before we settled on something we liked. Whereas this one, my editor liked it immediately. Obviously, the art department liked it, and I just was, swooning over it. So, we were happy with that from the very beginning.
Yeah, and it's like just the way the word The Cage comes up in the middle, your name. It's just like, oh yeah, you feel like you're locked. Like the words are locked there as well. Really, really loved it. So Piper Goodeve and Chris Andrews Ciola are the narrators for the audiobook. Did you have a hand in selecting them?
They sent me little audition clips of several contenders. And I was so pleased that they decided to go with both a man and a woman, because the book is, he said, she said kind of story. Shay narrates part of it, but there's alternating chapters with her boss, Barrett, the titular bad guy. And I thought, I really wasn't sure that those chapters should be spoken in a woman's voice. I really thought it would help to have that be a man's voice, and they agreed. And so they had the two alternating narrators, and I thought they did a tremendous job.
Yeah, and what I really love is because she's using the first person, it's got to be this one person that's telling the story, but then wait a second, who are these other people? Because the way she's defending herself in every single thing she does, from not just a crime, she's defending herself from her lifestyle, from who she is with her husband, from where she's been, everything. So it's like she had to be the one with that kind of power. She had the power of the voice because she didn't have any other powers, what I was thinking. Yeah. That's what I was coming away with. So Are you an audiobook listener? Do you spend a lot of time listening?
I do. We drive back and forth. We divide our time between North Carolina and Florida. So we have these long road trips twice a year. And audiobooks are, a miracle for passing the time on those road trips. We always listen then. I also sometimes listen just, at home, but especially in the car. I love to listen to audiobooks.
So you're the concierge, like your husband says, well, we're going to take the drive next week. Do you discuss what you're going to be listening, or are you the play person?
I choose. I choose. He likes my choices, so it's okay.
Well, it's really funny because we're like that with watching television shows. I said my husband's concierge of I said, last night I said, Reacher's on. Would you like to watch Reacher? And then he does this thing like, tell me about it. I'm just like, okay. We watched Tom Cruise movies with him. This is the same thing. So last night I really scored because we sat down and watched, and he says, I'll do a second episode. More than one in a night. Like, we'll just sit down and go like, tonight's 1883, and then we can move to da-da-da. And it's like the Gilded Age. If we don't like it, we could still watch for other reasons. It's really funny. But then he'll come in sometimes, I'll be cooking and I go, what do we want to watch? And he goes, episodes, I'm not going there. And then last night he goes, wait, all the episodes are there immediately? See, I goes, these I can watch. It's like very, very funny. Very, very funny. So I can't say that I have handed him audiobooks and said, I think you'd like listening to this. But if you don't travel along, it's like these piecemeal things.
Yes, yeah. You can't follow the story.
Now, I tell this funny story about when we left the office in March 2020, we were reading a book, and we got in the car in like June 2020 to go to the city. And my son goes, they're still dealing with this like 3 months later. And it was so funny.
That's hilarious.
It was dead on right, because we hadn't been in the car to sit there and listen. He's like, whoa, look at all the stuff that happened to us the last couple of months. Wow, these poor people still there, So when you have free time, do you usually gravitate to reading thrillers, or do you read sort of eclectically?
Very eclectically. And in fact, this is because right now I can't really be focusing too much on the next book because there's so much going on with the launch of The Cage. I'm doing a lot of reading now, and I have a whole backlog of books, but I'm reading literary fiction. I'm reading romantic fiction, not romances, but something in that vein. And I am also reading thrillers.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because sometimes I have what I call required reading for things I'm going to want to do interviews with. But then it's like, okay, there's this book about opioids and fentanyl and what's happened. I can't remember the author's Samson. I can't remember his last name. And I'm like reading that chapters because I don't have time to read the whole thing. But I find that I do that and with the Anthony Bourdain book, the one that was about him on the road. So I'll just read chapter, because you don't have to read, quite the same way to be taking away.
But nonfiction, that's right.
Yeah, for nonfiction, you can absolutely do that. I have the Lindsay Vonn book, which I'm dying to delve into more, just because the Olympics, she's an interesting personality. I just need a lot more hours. Either that or my job needs to be reading instead of doing everything else. So, and unfortunately that doesn't happen.
I don't know how you do it all.
It's a juggle. It's a complete juggle. But so what's next for you? Can you tell us anything, a little snippet about the next book?
The next book is still untitled.
Okay.
So I can't give anything there, but it's the story. It's a thriller of a woman lawyer who's built her career representing men accused of sex crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And she's, the one who stands up in court and defends them. And she's the one who, when a complainant comes forward without having gone to the police. She's the one who rushes in with the NDA, with a cash settlement and an NDA. And so, you could say she's a traitor to her gender. She's got an interesting story, family story of her own. And then something right at the beginning, like the cage, an inciting event happens that changes everything for her.
Wow. Well, I look forward to it. If you have not read House on Fire, go back and read House on Fire, which is a great story of family. It's two blended families coming together, and there's something that happens there. And once again, what Bonnie's done is there's this moment of what did happen. And it's that moment of being in the car. It's like being in the elevator. And that's the best way I could put it.
Yeah.
The person in the car, it's like, okay, now who are you going to believe? And who's going to really tell the story? And once again, somebody's dead. So, it goes from there. I don't know, Bonnie. I'm not getting in a car with you. I'm not getting in an elevator with me.
I don't blame you.
I see you at a conference, getting in the elevator, getting on the escalator. I'm not sure. I think
I'll wait for the next one.
It'll come soon enough. It's not going to be a problem. And I'll carry the food. It's not a big deal. Guys, this was such a pleasure because we never got to catch up about House on Fire. So to be able to Zoom with one another, it was great.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. And to our readers, look forward to seeing you next time. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. Thanks, everyone.